When I was Health Secretary, I was the most unpopular man in the country.
Chancellor Jermey Hunt.
Evaluate yourself as Chancellor.
I'd probably give myself an 8 out of 10. There was just so much chaos at Westminster. And the truth is that I am really worried about what is happening to London.
Where are we going wrong with taxes?
The average family are paying £4,000 in tax, not for schools or the NHS, but for debt interest. Even Trump can't buck the market.
What do people not understand about running the country? How hard it really is?
What happens in government is...
Do you think the political system needs a reform?
It does. There's too much wokery. A quarter of adults are not in work. We need to change.
What do you think is the biggest single threat to the UK right now?
The biggest of all is...
Jeremy, is the UK economy failing right now?
We're doing badly, but I think you can overstate it. And I think if you look at the trend lines rather than the headlines, people have always been really bearish about the UK. I mean, we're brilliant at washing our dirty linen in public. We have newspapers like the Financial Times and The Economist that are read in every corner of the world. And so people know about all our problems and they know less about our strengths. And at the moment, we've got two really big strengths that people don't talk about. Our tech sector, which is the third biggest in the world after the US and China. And also we have a big defense sector, which is obviously, sadly, very important now with what's happening in Ukraine. So I actually think we have got great prospects. Obviously, I don't agree with a lot of the decisions the government's taken, which are, take us in the wrong direction. But, I've got kids and I'm an optimist for the future of the UK.
Right, so what are those things you don't agree with that the UK are currently doing, our government?
Well, I think there's two things where I believe that the government is either wrong or failed to understand the challenge. One of them won't be a surprise, Rob, and it's tax.
We were getting on so well.
I just feel that you look around the world and the countries which have high energy, dynamic economies have lower tax levels. North America, Asia, places like China.
Well, Argentina recently.
Yes, indeed. But places which have high taxes, which is mainly Europe, including the UK, there is less dynamism. And that is because if you raise taxes up too high, you stop work being worthwhile, and you crush what economists call the animal spirits that you need in a modern economy. And so I believe, I put up taxes. I had to do it after the pandemic, but for me, it was always something that was temporary. We had to stabilize the market, show that we were good for the money as a country. But I always thought, as we were able to, we need to get back on the path to lower tax. So that's one. And the other one is a really boring topic, but as a property guy, you will totally get this, and that is debt. In the property world, you think about mortgages, and you watch your mortgage like a hawk, and you really care about what's happening to interest rates. Well, it's the same for the country, and we've got debt now at 100% of GDP. Our debt interest, this is something very not really well known, but it's an extraordinary fact that our debt interest is about £105 billion a year. But for the average household, that is about £4,000 a year in tax. So the average family are paying about £4,000 in tax, not for schools or the NHS or the police, but for debt interest.
Wow, and not repaying the debt, just the interest,
That's just the interest.
Yeah, interest-only debt.
It's the interest on the debt. It's not repaying the debt at all. And by the way, that is the average household. The average household income in this country, or the average median wage, is 37 grand. Yeah. So many people are paying a lot more than that. And the problem is that money is dead money, because money that's paying for debt interest isn't being invested in
it's not mobile.
New buildings or new businesses. It's not being spent on consumption. People, more doctors putting more money into the economy by spending their salary. A third of it's going abroad, actually, to international investors. So it's really big drag on the economy. And I think that we've got to get out of we've got a tax doom loop and a debt doom loop. And in a way, it's I don't want to be apocalyptic, but it's a double doom loop. And countries that are successful get out of that. And we can absolutely do that, but I don't see any recognition from the government of that.
So I want to come back to the taxation part, because I think there's a lot to talk about. But debt. So Ray Dalio seems to be going on this parade on many shows. There was a headline, his quote, "Something worse than a recession is coming." In my book, the only thing worse than a recession is a depression. And I know the US is different from the UK, but I guess it's linked. But yeah, he believes that these big nations like the US are in too much debt. They're in a debt deficit. And people are looking at the UK and the US and not seeing them as investable. Therefore, the money they need to get rid of their debt deficit won't come in. Are you seeing this in the UK? Is this why bonds are really low? And
the reason bonds are low in the UK is slightly different. It's a bit more UK specific, which is that the markets can't see an economic growth plan that is really going to bring down debt in the medium term. But Ray Dalio is a very smart guy,
yes, yeah.
and
I
read his book, How Countries Go Broke, over the summer. It's well worth a read.
Yeah,
and I think the sobering thing about that book is that even the US is not immune to the laws of gravity when it comes to debt. And up till now, the US, which, by the way, we're on 100% of GDP. The US is 123% of GDP. So they've got,
and isn't their debt like 10 times more than us, something like 30 trillion or something?
It's huge because they have a much bigger GDP than ours.
Yeah.
But it has traditionally been the case that because the dollar has been the world's premium currency, what we call the reserve currency, so everyone wants to hold dollars, that the US hasn't had to follow the rules that everyone else has had to follow, and they've been able to borrow quite freely. But after Trump did his Liberation Day tariffs, the markets went funny.
They did, because I'd put £300,000 into the stock market like the day before, so I felt that. Yeah.
Dear me, gosh, yes.
I just hold it, so it's fine. But.
Yeah, but that he said, his phrase was, "The market's got a bit icky." But the truth is that even Trump can't buck the markets, and even America now has to recognise the risks. Now, is Ray Dalio right that we're going to head for a mega correction, the once in 80-year correction? Well, I'm not an analyst or an expert, but what I do know.
But you were the Chancellor of the UK.
I was the Chancellor. Yes, that's true. But I wouldn't feel qualified to predict whether the world was heading for one of those big corrections. But what I think was interesting was that he said underneath that, every 7 to 8 years, you have a more minor correction. And that is something that's in Rachel Reeves's power to avoid. If she takes action now, she can avoid...
What can she do then?
She could say to the markets that over the course of the Parliament, we will never increase public spending by more than the growth in the economy, for example. And that would just persuade markets that we were going to be responsible with our spending. She could reform welfare, which would relieve a lot of pressure on the finances, and that would mean that taxes wouldn't have to go up so much. She could make a big push on public sector productivity and say, look, we want to pay public sector workers well, but anything above inflation has to be paid for with productivity increases, which is the rule in the private sector. So, there are lots and lots of things that she could do, which I think would help get all those numbers that are beginning to flash red start to look a bit more healthy.
And why isn't she doing any of those?
Well, part of it is because she is a centre-left Chancellor, and people on the left have tended to believe that you can borrow your way to growth. I mean, we heard it again from Andy Burnham this week, and that's, something where people on the right tend to be more nervous of debt mounting up. And also, she doesn't have a problem with higher taxes. I mean, I think she's one of the more sensible ones on the Labour side, I hasten to add. But I think her worldview is quite 1997. You know, the economy will be fine. I just need to tax a bit more and spend a bit more on public services, and that's what a Labour government will do. But because of the levels of debt, you have to do a lot more if we're actually going to get the economy growing.
So, I mean, the 1990s are 30 years ago, and things change. Can she not see that we're spending too much on welfare? Productivity could come from getting people back to work. Is this, you know, I'm an entrepreneur and I started from nothing and I worked hard and I felt down sometimes and I didn't phone the doctor and get signed off for a few months. Not everyone does that, I know, but I think it's been easier to do that. And actually, do you know what made me feel really good? A good day's work made me feel really good afterwards, even if it was hard. And we're told we need to build 1.5 million houses. So to me, why don't we, you know, get some of the people off welfare, off the streets, give them apprentice jobs, manual work, bricklayers, you know, roofers, build these houses. They'd save a lot of money, they'd improve employment. Am I naive?
Do you know, I have exactly the same view, but maybe that's not a surprise because I also set up and ran my own business for 14 years before I went into politics. And, you know, you, I think, hit the nail on the head when you said, you know, after a good day's work, you feel good.
You do, yeah.
And at the moment, we are signing off about 1,000 people every single day as being not just too ill to work, but too ill to even look for work. And the majority of that is for mental health reasons.
Wow.
Anxiety, depression. Well, every doctor I ever met when I was health secretary, they said, you know, if you've got mental illness, you need social contact. You need to be with people. You need those work colleagues, the water cooler moments, the post-work drinks, the friendships that build up in the world of work. But if you park someone on benefit, you're taking them away from all that social contact, all that sense of self-worth. And, you know, what's going to happen is the mental illness will get worse. And not only that, but if by saying you've got anxiety or depression, you get entitlement to universal credit health component or personal independence payment, you then create a worry that if that person gets better and they tell the authorities they got better, they could lose their benefit. So you create the risk that you're actually locking people into a life on benefit. And it's really, I mean, we were getting the numbers on benefit down until the pandemic. It's something that has come up and bite us after the pandemic. But, you know, from Rachel Reese's point of view, just let's put ourselves in her shoes for a moment. If she got the benefit bill down to where it was in 2019, just before the pandemic, that saves nearly 50 billion quid a year. And she wouldn't have to put up a single tax.
And isn't that not what they're saying the black hole is now? So isn't that just a quick win?
She would be able to avoid all those tax rises, which are so damaging to the economy. But actually, of course, great for business because you're creating the workers that businesses can hire. And also, most importantly of all, great for the individuals involved. I mean, you know, I know these are all kind of numbers, but, you know, the NHS has a world-leading talking therapies program for people with anxiety or depression. And I happen to know it costs about £1 billion a year to run. You could save with some of that 49, 50 billion you're saving from the benefits reform. You could double the amount of people that we put into anxiety or depression talking therapies. And we're doing them a massive favour. You know, what we're saying is if you're not well, we're going to make you better. Yeah. And it's so much more healthy for the individuals and for society.
So why are Labour not doing anything about this?
Well, they tried in the summer, but they did it in a very ham-fisted way. And they said this is all about getting 5 billion of savings. And obviously for Labour MPs, that was very challenging. What they should have done is said, here is a thought-out programme, not a rush programme, but a thought-out programme that is going to make life better for people who've lost their jobs or people who are unwell. And, you know, we're going to do this big expansion in mental health. We're going to have a big expansion of physiotherapy for people who've hurt their back. And, you know, if you want to know how to do this, you don't have to look very far. Look at somewhere like Denmark. I mean, they are so good at getting people into work and keeping people in work. If we had the same number of disabled people in work as they have in Denmark, there'd be 600,000 more disabled people working in the UK.
Wow.
So, there's so much we can learn from how other countries do these things.
Mm. Yeah, I was having a lunch with Kwasi, as I told you recently, and he said, when you look at the numbers of the people actually working, i.e. in the working age and able to work, i.e. over 18, etc., 1/3 of those aren't working. Is that about right? Does that sound about right? So about 11-ish million out of about 33-ish million able to work. Sounds crazy.
It's the 11 million is right. It's actually 41 million for the whole of the UK. That might be the England number.
Right. Okay.
But it's basically a quarter. A quarter of adults are not in work. And Rob, here's the thing which makes...
I'll hire some of them. They could come and apply to work for me.
Here's the thing that is so ridiculous. At the same time, we're trying to deal with an aging population, growing numbers of older people, more people retired. So actually, we need more of the adult age population to be in work in order to make sure we can afford the services that our parents and grandparents are needing.
I'll ask again, and you've sort of answered it, but maybe in a more direct way. Why aren't Labour doing this?
Well, I think they now are beginning to understand that they need to do this. The trouble is they've wasted a year and they've lost a lot of momentum. And in politics, your golden period is when you're brand new in the job and people are giving you the benefit of the doubt.
And don't hate you yet.
They don't hate you yet. Yeah, I'm afraid it happens to all of us. I mean, when I was health secretary, I was the most unpopular man in the country. So it happens to everyone. And they've lost a lot of political capital in the last year. But, they are also looking to regain credibility. And I would say that for, business people like yourself, Rob, you don't care the party label. You just want a government that's got solutions to the big problems we face. And if they came up with a plan for welfare reform, a plan to sort out the productivity in the public sector, which is often so woeful, if they came up with a plan to deal with our debt, I think you'd say, I don't mind if it's Labour. Sounds like a good plan and we've got to get behind it. So I think it's actually the key to how they get out of the hole that they're in as well.
So, as I said, I want to come back to taxes, but something I've become acutely more aware of in the last 5 years, as I think the world's gotten more political. I used to stay out of politics and just crack on with running my business and staying in my lane. But it feels like, since lockdown, it's important for us all to be knowledgeable. And I've interviewed so many great politicians. And one thing I've understood is I don't know anywhere near as much as I think. And I can sit here and go, why don't we get everyone back to work? But, you were the Chancellor. So what do people not understand about being the Chancellor, about running the country, how hard it really is? Because it must be much harder than everyone thinks.
Gosh, that is a great question. I'm not sure I've properly been asked it before. Let me give you a good answer to that. So try and understand what it's like to be a government minister. So I had no background in economics, no background in the financial services. I never worked in the city, and I become Chancellor and the markets are collapsing around my ears and I've got to take massively important decisions to stabilise the pound, the stock market, the bond markets. And by the way, it was exactly the same when I became health secretary. I knew nothing about the NHS and I had to deal with...
Is there not a recruitment issue?
Well, this is what happens in politics. So the prime ministers appoint the people they think are the best people around them into the cabinet, but they're not experts in their fields. And what happens, I think, is that let's take health secretary. You arrive and you're feeling inside, you're panicking a bit because you really don't know very much about what's what. But morning, noon and night, you're answering questions about your brief. It's Parliament, it's the media, it's conferences, it's in your constituency. And after answering questions non-stop for about a month, you begin to think, I know this stuff.
Right.
And you begin to think you really know it all. And it's only when you leave the job, as I've done many times, and then you say, I'm going to write a book about it. And I'm going to write the book that I wish someone had given me on the day I got this job. Now, that's what I'm writing now, actually. I'm writing a book about economic growth in the UK. It'll come out next year, and it's the book I wish I'd been given the day I became Chancellor.
I think you're going to need to write it quicker for us, Jeremy. We need it now.
Thanks, Rob. But the thing is, it's only when you write a book you realise you actually didn't know the half of it. And so, of course, we have structures in place. We have civil servants who are usually very smart and hardworking who help you get through some of these difficult storms. But the reality is you are an amateur doing these very, very difficult jobs.
Wouldn't we want a Chancellor who's got really good economics background?
Sometimes it's a good thing not to be an expert in that field because you have common sense and you can challenge the status quo. But the way I think about it is slightly more connected to your roots and my roots. I mean, as an entrepreneur, as someone who set up a business, you know, when you built your first property, you didn't know how the property business worked. You had to learn. You didn't know how you got loans from a bank. You didn't know how you did employment contracts. What you had to do was to surround yourself with good people and trust them. And where you didn't have expertise, find it out and then learn on the job. And that's what you have to do as a government minister. It's a fatal mistake to arrive in a ministry like the Treasury thinking you know it all. You have to think, okay, I don't know it all. And when it comes to financial markets, this person does, I trust them, I'm going to listen to them. When it comes to tax, I don't know how the tax system works, but this person does. And the really smart ministers don't just talk to their own civil servants, they talk to people outside. And all those meetings they have and all those times they're asked questions, they're when you're learning on the job.
So I've often suggested this on my podcast. I'm going to suggest it to you. Why don't Labour go and call up Sir Jim Ratcliffe? Oh, I understand you're throwing your billions of investment away from the UK. Come to Downing Street, let's have a chat. You know, maybe you can advise and help. Why don't they call up James Dyson, Richard Branson? We have got talent and charismatic talent as well. Billionaires, you know, because being a billionaire is like running, it's an economy. Why are we not like learning from all these great people we've got in the UK, maybe even doing something, having like an entrepreneurial advisory board? And I think also, like you could call up Ray Dalio. I'm sure he would contribute because, you know, these people are later in life. They're probably in giving back mode. They're probably, you know, probably the billionaires on the rises. They probably want a few policies and they're probably still in power mode. But, you know, these 70-year-old plus billionaires, maybe with a bit of time to give back, why can't we use all this intellect?
We should. And in fact, you know, when I was Chancellor, James Dyson came in and saw me several times. I had the heads of the big banks. I had the heads of our major businesses. They all came and see me. They came and saw me the whole time. And I hope Rachel Reeves is doing the same.
Do you think she is?
I think she started that way, but, you know, I think there's been quite a rupture with business because of the employers' national insurance rise, which businesses felt was a betrayal.
Yeah.
But I would say the question is not just invite them in for coffee. That's the easy
Yeah,
bit.
it's creating a board, isn't it?
It is actually, well, it's actually about learning from those people how to get things done. Now, your podcast is called Disruptors. And I think we in the political system need to be honest that we need a bit more disruptor spirit inside government. And what happens in government is that your appetite for risk becomes way too cautious compared to what it's like in business. And there are various reasons for that, but one of them is that if you're a cabinet minister, your job depends on the Prime Minister. They can fire you at any time in a reshuffle. And what number 10 wants is a quiet life. They want no trouble in your patch.
Right.
And so
Which they're not succeeding in at the moment.
They're not succeeding at the moment. But, so if you do something bold and controversial that creates a stir, it could be bad for your career. And the result is that most cabinet ministers' mindset is to try and calm things down the whole time. And that is something that if we want things to change, we need to change. And, just look at the issue, forget the rights and wrongs of the issue, but just look at the issue that's on the tip of everyone's tongues at the moment, which is the small boats crossings. Trump got the irregular crossings across the Mexican border down by more than 90% in 8 months. Keir Starmer, who said it was totally important for him as well, in a longer period of time, they've actually gone up by a third. And the truth is that Trump has come in with a business mentality and he is saying, I'm going to make stuff happen. And we have forgotten that in politics. And I say that as a businessman who went into politics, I understand the rules are different. Businesses are dictatorships. Politics is a democracy and you have accountability and you have to spend time explaining what you're doing and parliamentary procedures and the media. So it's a different world. And so I thought for many years, look, just accept politics and business are different. But having come out of government, I think that we have made a mistake. We have not understood properly that ordinary people are beginning to despair that the politicians they elect are not able to solve the big problems we face. And what they want is more disruptor spirit, people who are actually going to judge themselves not on the process, not on whether they did a good media interview, but whether they actually get results. And that is a cultural change that we need to have.
Right now, your personal data is being sold and exploited, and probably without you knowing. Every day, countless companies are invading your personal privacy by buying and selling your data for their profits. But the good news is there's a way to opt out of this, and this is why I'm excited to partner with Incogni. Because what Incogni do is they work, hustle, and force on your behalf in the background to remove all of your personal data from all of these intrusive databases, marketing lists, and companies. So to stop the spam and protect your privacy, go right now to incogni.com/disruptors to get an exclusive 60% discount off an Incogni plan. That's incogni.com/disruptors, or click the link in the description. Evaluate yourself as Chancellor. Were you a good Chancellor? Give yourself a score out of 10, and what might you do better next time?
I am really proud of what I achieved. If you looked at the one big thing that every family in the country needed me to do, which was to get inflation down from 11% to 2%, avoid a huge recession, get the economy growing again, what people call a soft landing, after we had the COVID and Ukraine shock, I did that. So in terms of that one big thing, I'd probably give myself an 8 out of 10. But there's also really big things that I didn't do, and I wish I'd had longer to do. I didn't do the big welfare reform that we've just been talking about. We got timed out by the election, but I would love to have done that more. I didn't properly devolve power around the country to elected mayors, which is the only way we're going to unlock economic growth in the regions outside London, by actually giving our great cities and regions power over their own destiny and the ability to solve their own problems, and that just wasn't possible in the time that we had. I started with a big public sector productivity program with the NHS in my last budget. That was announced, and the government's taken that, they've grabbed it, and they're building on it. But I didn't roll it out for the whole of the rest of the public sector, and we had big strikes across the public sector. So that was, that was not finished. So I'm pleased with some of the things I did. By the way, the other thing on the credit side that I'm very proud of is increasing defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. My dad was in the Royal Navy. To me, it was totally clear that we need to step up our defences given what Putin is up to. So that was a positive. Does that give you is that a balanced balanced picture?
I expected you to be balanced. So the political system itself. So Liz Truss has been doing the rounds, and I believe that she said that doesn't really matter who's running the country because, you know, the civil servants are a blockage and it's very difficult to kind of get anything done or get anything passed. Do you think the political system needs a reform?
It does, but I don't agree with Liz's analysis that it's all the fault of the blob or the system. In my experience, if you are clear about what you want as a government minister, the civil servants work their butts off to deliver it.
Right.
But you have to be very clear about what you want, and you have to take smart decisions. You know, if you do bad decisions, they will go wrong. But I don't think it's right to blame the people working for you for the problems we had. I think the leaders themselves need to pull their socks up, and and I think you can make very big changes if you want to. I mean, George Osborne, when he was Chancellor, in 2010, straight after the global financial crisis, for every £4 the state was spending, we were borrowing £1. So like literally a quarter of the cost of running the NHS was just being borrowed every year. That's how broke we were as a country.
Yeah.
And he got that 10% deficit down to 2%. Took really hard decisions. I took really hard decisions after the debt and the energy shock. I squeezed inflation out of the system. So we are capable of doing big things. But I'll tell you where I think the British state falls down. It's taking long-term decisions when there isn't a crisis. Normally when there's a crisis, one way or another, we do the right thing. But when there isn't a crisis, when there's a kind of a slow burn, which is like the problem with debt or with the small boats crossings, these things have been going up gradually year in, year out. That's when we're not as good as we need to be at gripping problems quickly and sorting them out.
So you mentioned inflation and you got it right down. Feels like it's more now a strategy to let it go up. And I think most people who are entrepreneurial have got some understanding of money, understand that high inflation can be good if you're in a lot of debt because it can pay your debt down. And I imagine it's never going to be publicly announced that, we're going to keep inflation nice and high so we can pay off our debt off the back door. But it seems like that's what's happening now.
I really hope it isn't. I don't think it is, actually. I mean, I'll tell you why. For our national debt, a lot of it is now index linked, which means it's linked to inflation.
Right.
So inflation goes up, the debt goes up with it. So that old way of paying off your debt doesn't have the same impact that it used to.
Yeah.
But it's also really bad for two other reasons. First of all, because interest rates go up, because they have to go up when inflation goes up, because the Bank of England then wants to bring inflation down. Then that means it's much more expensive for businesses who want to borrow money to expand. So it's a big, families are paying more for their mortgages. They have less money to spend. That's a big dampener on the economy. But most importantly for Rachel Reeves, when interest rates go up, she has to pay more for our national debt.
Yes.
So that debt interest, which by the way now costs nearly double our defence budget, is just debt interest. It's about half the cost of running the NHS. I mean, it's over 100 billion quid a year. That's the £4,000 a year that we were talking about earlier. Now if you have high inflation, that bill goes up.
Yeah.
And it makes her job even more of a nightmare, which is why you cannot afford to take risks with inflation. And unfortunately, the increase
is creeping up, isn't it?
It is, because the increase to employers' national insurance, sure enough, lots of employers said, well, I can't absorb all of this. I'm going to have to put up some prices.
Yeah. And unemployment's gone up quite a lot since then as well. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. And what I fear has happened is that something else is happening at the same time, which is that we are on the cusp of a massive AI jobs revolution, which means that companies are culling the number of jobs they offer because they're saying, could a computer do this job more quickly or more cheaply than a human being? And that's why you go into Tesco Express and it's screens everywhere. You go to McDonald's, it's screens everywhere.
You try and talk to your bank, your credit card company, you've got to do it on messaging. You're messaging a bot.
But also accountants and consultants, they're all massively reducing the number of graduate employees. I fear that the employers' national insurance hike triggered a lot of employers saying, okay, well, if employing people is becoming more expensive, I'm going to go headlong into this AI revolution.
Well, you're forced into it. You have no choice. We had 108 staff when lockdown happened. And, we had to let a lot of them go. And then the furlough came in and we brought a lot of them back. And of course, as we all know, inflation got really quite high. And we didn't want to just let people go, but we just thought if people leave, we'll try and replace them with AI rather than rehiring. And, we've got down to like maybe 90 staff. And, when you have less staff, you're also more agile. But I've always been very proud that we're a local employer and we employ 100 people and we pay all these taxes. But then there's so many unemployed people and there's so many people on welfare that could be in work. And surely we're going to need all this manual labour, aren't we?
Well, we don't know is the answer.
Right. If we need to build all these houses, we need plumbers. We need all of it.
Absolutely will. And in the past, when you've had technology revolutions and big changes like the invention of electricity and the IT revolution, there have been new jobs that have emerged that we didn't know we needed.
Yes.
Like podcasters.
But wish it would pay better.
But the AI revolution, we're all hoping that's going to be the case. But it may not be quite like that because it's happening so fast. And all those other revolutions happened over decades, even centuries. But the AI revolution is going to be, it's hitting us like a train now. And so it's going to, I think, lead to a lot of social disruption.
Yeah, it is very disruptive. Let's talk about reform. I still want to get to the favourite subject, which is tax, so we will. Have reform got a chance? And what do you think about if reform got in?
They've got a chance. They are formidable. Nigel Farage is a brilliant communicator. And in a five-party system, which is what we've got now, because it's not just Labour and the Conservatives, there's the Lib Dems, the Greens, Reform, possibly Jeremy Corbyn's new party, could be a six-party system. You only need 30% of the vote in a first-past-the-post system to win. And Reform are on that now. Yeah. So it's absolutely perfectly reasonable question to ask. I would say two things, though, as a caution. The first is, I think we've got no idea what reform would actually be like in government. I mean, if you take the last...
I bet they haven't.
No, I think they
I've been to their offices. Yeah. It's a little startup. Yeah.
I mean, they, have been promising to reopen the coal mines in South Wales, renationalise the water industry, bring back the two-child benefit cap. I mean, and cut taxes. So they are like spending like there's no tomorrow. If you thought, Kwasi made a mistake with the mini budget, this is off the charts different. I don't think that they have any economic credibility at the moment. Now that can change, but as things stand at the moment, it would be incredibly dangerous for the economy if they started implementing those policies. But the main thing I would say, Rob, is, let's not jump the gun here. This next election is probably going to be in 2029. Keir Starmer doesn't have to have an election until 5 years after he entered Downing Street. And sometimes they do it after 4 years. But people who are on the back foot, as he most definitely is, tend to wait. So the most likely time for the election is 4 years from now. And just look how much politics has changed in the last year. So in 1 year, everything's been turned upside down. Labour are, trailing badly. Another 4 years, I just think we've got to not jump the gun. I think Conservatives will be back, and I'll tell you why.
Why?
Because in the end, come 4 years' time, people are going to be desperate for a party offering credible solutions. They don't want people peddling, magic money trees and saying it's so easy, we've just got to do A, B, and C. They will want credible solutions that tackle the big problems we face. Now, that's what in our country, in our system, that's what opposition parties should do. And I think we will do that. But we've got a lot of work to do, don't get me wrong, but I think we will get back in the race.
Do you feel that Conservatives lost their identity? It felt like, usual, fairly conservative policies kind of forgot. Obviously, government grew and grew and grew, and that's not normally a big bloated government isn't normally a conservative thing. Taxes kept going up. It's not normally a conservative thing. Do you think they lost their identity? Did they become a little bit left?
We didn't, but we probably did lose our identity. And why is that? Because we had these big economic crises. Everyone thought it was the right thing to support companies with the furlough scheme, the bounce back loans, give the NHS the money it needed for the vaccine programme. But it cost 350 billion quid. And, in the end...
that needs to be paid back.
That had to be paid back. And so I think we were right to be pragmatic and not ideological and say, we're not going to spend this money. But yes, it probably did blur our identity. And I think the other thing that happened were the Brexit wars, which, basically you had this... It doesn't matter who you voted, whether you voted Leave or Remain. You had this big division in the country between the people who wanted to stay and the people who wanted to leave. And then in the end, we voted to leave, but the establishment didn't want to leave. They wanted to stay. And so it was a massive challenge to our democracy to show the 52% who voted leave that we were going to do what we said we'd do and honour what they wanted to do. And in that process, there was just so much chaos at Westminster. Not just in the Conservative side, but in all parties, and I think that was in the end, that was the reason why we had this, David Cameron to Theresa May to Boris Johnson to Liz Truss to Rishi Sunak. Quite a lot of that were the kind of aftershocks of that Brexit disruption.
Do you think people would forgive that though and forget about that?
I think over time, but I think we were in for 14 years and people were exhausted by the drama. They were cross that their taxes had to go up after the pandemic and for the energy shocks. And I think there was a bigger problem, which is that going back to the financial crisis in 2007-8, across the whole of the Western world, economies have started growing again, but the benefits haven't been spread out. And you've got large communities that just feel that things have stagnated. And so, that was something that we didn't sort out. We talked about levelling up, but we weren't around for long enough to deliver it. And that's something that whoever is in power needs to think hard about.
So let's say Reform get in, and Nigel Farage is Prime Minister, and in that process, he calls you up and he wants you to be the Chancellor. Will you come out of retirement? Would you do that?
I can tell you that it's never going to happen for a very simple reason, that Nigel Farage once said that he had one of the biggest boosts in Reform membership ever the day I became Chancellor. so it's not going to happen. But
let's say he did ask you.
I'll say this though. I'll say this. I'm going to write a book on what I've learnt after being Chancellor, how to fix the British economy. And I hope everyone reads that, because this is not a party political book. I'm not trying to say I got everything right. In fact, I'm very honest about what I got wrong. But in there were all the things that I wish I'd known the day I took over the reins. And if you want to read that, it's all in there.
But you don't think you're ever getting the call?
Oh, by the way, I don't think I'll get the call. And in the highly unlikely situation that I think my wife would say, hang on, you were on the front line for nearly 14 years, and you always promised that you'd give the next bit of your life to the family. So I'm in a different stage of my life.
So where are we going wrong with taxes? It feels like the only thing they know how to do is increase taxes. So what are the main taxes that you think could or should come down?
Well, I would focus on the ones that unlock economic growth and reward work. That was why I cut 4p off employees' national insurance. I'd like to abolish that tax. In the age of AI, we should be doing everything we can to encourage people off welfare into work and encourage employers to employ people. And national insurance is a crazy tax.
Yeah.
There are other taxes that don't work at all well, like stamp duty, which has a big drag effect on the housing market. The way the thresholds work for income tax are ridiculous. There's a big threshold when you move into the higher rate of tax because you lose your child benefit. But then there's another hike. When you get to 100 grand, you first of all the personal allowance goes. So your marginal rate of tax is not 45%; it's 60%. But also because you lose entitlement to childcare, which could be 6 grand, we're creating a massive incentive for people to earn £99,999, but not 100 grand.
Yeah,
and what you want, those individuals are some of the most economically productive in the country, and you should be encouraging people to want to earn more. So lots of things in the structure of tax is wrong.
Where do you think Labour might start? Do you think they will actually bring a tax down ever?
I'm quite pessimistic. I think Labour people tend to think that life is about social justice and redistribution, and they came into politics to take money from
So they're
rich
Marxists,
people.
basically.
They're not quite Marxists because, I think, Rachel Reeves believes in capitalism, but she wants to change.
Where's she providing evidence in her behaviour that she believes in capitalism?
Good question. But she believes in redistribution, and
But that already exists.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And the danger is, in principle, so do I. But you don't want to do it in a way that is damaging to economic growth.
Wow. Okay. So I didn't comment on this when it happened because I don't like to just jump on bandwagons. But I did a LinkedIn post this morning and it's all kicked off because I commented on Sadiq Khan's pay rise. And at first I thought, well, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have anything against the pay rise. But then I thought, wait a minute. If London was a company, London is failing as a company, so the CEO would probably get fired, let alone have a pay rise. Is it right that Sadiq Khan got a pay rise? And what's happening to London? Is it failing?
Well, I am really worried about what is happening to London.
You live in London?
I live in London in the week and in my constituency at the weekends.
Yeah.
And I am really worried. We're having a huge exodus of wealth and of talent. And, these are the wealthiest people, but when they leave, they're not spending money in taxis and restaurants where lots of people on much lower salaries earn their living. But most importantly, we have a housing crisis in London and new houses are not being built. And, it's a classic thing that Sadiq Khan did. He piled on the responsibility to build social housing as part of every development. And the result is that it became unprofitable for developers. And so we're getting no or very, very low numbers of new houses being built. It's an absolute tragedy. So I don't think he's doing a good job. I don't go quite as far as Donald Trump in my criticisms of Sadiq Khan, but I have to say that I think the timing of that pay rise is extraordinary, to say the least.
So what can we do to turn London around?
Well, I think one of the things we need to look at is the way that property taxes work, because we have this 15% stamp duty for the most expensive properties. Now, most people think, well, that's fine. If you're lucky enough to live in a house worth more than £1 million, you know, good luck to you, and we shouldn't worry about you. But what's silly about the structure of tax in London is that people in those very expensive houses are paying some of the lowest council tax rates in the country.
Right.
So we have this illogicality because the council tax rates are based on 1992 values. So a very logical thing to do would be to modernise the way council tax works in London, but unbung the property market by reforming stamp duty and getting rid of these very high levels of stamp duty, which are basically the start of the chain. You know, someone moves in an expensive property, then someone else will sell up lower down the ladder and lower down and lower down. And that's how the property market works. And property in London is not moving. And that's a big thing that we need to sort out.
Is this completely naive of me to suggest that we could really simplify our tax code? So is it true the tax code is 17,000 pages or is it 8,000 pages?
I've heard it's one of the longest in the world.
Yeah. So why don't we just have a flat rate of tax?
Well, I think the answer is that we should simplify. I completely agree. And then you have to ask, what are the circumstances that make it possible to simplify? When you simplify taxes, you have winners and losers.
Who are the losers?
Well, because, you know, if you, for example...
I know who the losers are, all the people that are employed to keep this tax code up to date.
Not just tax accountants.
Yeah.
You know, you will find, you know, if you did what I've just suggested on property taxes in London, the winners would be people who are moving house because stamp duty would be lower, but the losers could be council taxpayers in Westminster who have some of the lowest council tax rates in the country. So you have winners and losers. Yeah. And the reality is in a democracy, a big change with winners and losers can only happen in the first year or so of a parliament when a government can push it through. People kind of know in their hearts it's the right thing. And then you've got time to weather the storm and get to the other side. It's not going to happen in the run-up to a general election. So for tax reform, you know, Nigel Lawson's iconic tax reform, the thing that did so much to transform the country for the better was when he got rid of the 60% higher rate of tax and brought it down to 40 pence. Mm. That was in 1988. That was the year after a general election, the first year of Parliament. And in fact, that reform probably caused a mini recession.
Right.
But he weathered that storm and it stood the test of time.
Right. So what would be the downsides then of a simplified flat tax system? Or who would be the losers?
I'm presuming your flat tax would be lower than the current 45% level. So maybe it's 30%.
Well, let me give you some context. Nearly all my friends are entrepreneurs. And when we're talking about another one of our friend who left for Dubai or Portugal or wherever, we're like, well, what's your number? What's your number to not want, not have a load of tax specialists and not have a load of accountants and not have a load of different company structures and all that? Because we're always having to bob and weave away just to try and keep some of our money. What's your number where you just don't do any of that and you just pay it gratefully? And everyone seems to agree 25% flat. And maybe that's naive because maybe that reduces a lot of the tax take. But here's the thing, and I don't think... How many trillions of pounds must be stuck in assets and bank accounts that entrepreneurs will not release because they don't want capital gains tax and they don't want income tax? And surely, a flat, let's say, I am being ideological here, but bear with me. Let's say the government gave us like 3 months, flat tax 25%. Me and all my friends, we're just going to draw all of our money. We'll draw it all out. We'll give you your 25%. Now, I have not drawn much of a salary for the last few years because why would I pay 45% income tax on it? I do not sell my assets because why would I pay 28% capital gains tax on it? By paying all this stamp duty. So I am holding back millions that could be into the economy. And I'm not a billionaire. Have I got a point or am I ideological?
I agree with you. We need a much simpler tax system. And for entrepreneurs, I was a huge fan of entrepreneurs relief when we used to have it, because I thought it was such a great signal that we value the brilliant job that entrepreneurs do in the economy. And so I love that tax relief when it happened, and I thought it was a real shame that it's been whittled down over time. But if you were to do what you've just suggested and overnight introduce a 25% flat tax, then you and your friends would all be paying less tax. Now, you might repatriate some of your assets, you might invest more in the economy. There could be some knock-on positive effects, but the immediate impact is you're going to be paying less tax to Rachel Reeves.
Or maybe we wouldn't, because we might all of a sudden start paying ourselves higher salaries.
You might do, but you're still going to be paying less. And when you are in Rachel Reeves' shoes, where she's got a huge deficit as it is, she doesn't want to put up those taxes on people on lower incomes. So this is not an argument to say that we don't need tax simplification. It's just to say you've got to be super smart how you get there. Now, Margaret Thatcher was the last Prime Minister under whom we had really big tax simplification. And in her first Parliament, taxes, she did some tax simplification, but actually she had to put taxes up. In the 1981 budget, Geoffrey Howe put taxes up. Then she got things organised, and she was able to find a way to bring down taxes such that there were more winners and very few losers. And should we be going down that path? Absolutely.
And what about trying to get these millionaires and billionaires back? Because I think a lot of the exodus from London is that. I was talking to Kwasi, like I said, and I think common sense, I knew this, but he said 15 years ago, everyone was coming to London and it was thriving. And because, China, Russia, UAE, all in. And now it's an exodus the other way. Surely that's really damaging for us. And is it not is it not just envy politics that we're just pushing them all out?
I think it's more than that, but is it doing enormous damage? Yes. What should we do to put it right? I think there's one very simple thing that Rachel Reeves did, which I hope she changes her mind on, and that is to withdraw the decision to charge inheritance tax on people's worldwide assets. Because the thing is, a lot of these wealthy people, they can move anywhere in the world. And if you say that by being in the UK, you're going to pay 40% on your assets, not just in the UK, but anywhere in the world when you die, then they're going to move.
Yeah.
And I think that was a mistake. But I do understand that when there's a cost of living crisis, when the average median salary is 37 grand, the great British public say it's not fair if someone who's much, much wealthier is paying a lower rate of tax than I am. So I think the system that we had before was complex and not very fair. But everyone I've spoken to, and I've got friends too who've moved abroad, they say, look, I don't mind paying a bit more income tax. It's the inheritance tax that's the killer. That's the thing that's really persuaded me that I want to move abroad, because that's a type of wealth tax. And those are the assets that I was building up because I wanted to pass on to my family.
Something that really bothers me at the moment is business rates. Because you can start a business and not be doing much money, and you can be paying tens of thousands a year in business rates. Why can't we give a bit of business rates relief? Or why can't we stage VAT? I know you have to, 80, 90 grand and then you charge VAT. But why couldn't we stage it that it's 10% in the first year, 15% in the second? Why couldn't we stage up the corporation tax? And a load of people must be listening to this show, but also around the country thinking, I think I might start a business. I think I want to start a business. I think I need to start a business. Can't we just push them over the edge and get 1 million people starting a business with a few of these reliefs?
Well, you're bang on the money. And I'm someone who set up my own business. There's loads of businesses I set up actually before I went into politics. And the taxes that are the killer are the taxes you have to pay before you made a penny in profit. So VAT, employers' national insurance, business rates, those are the three killers.
Yeah.
And the problem with those taxes being high is that it means you're more likely to go bust when you hit a storm, because you've got this money being taken away from you by the government right at a moment of maximum vulnerability. So I agree, if we're going to help businesses get off the ground, we should look very carefully at those taxes they have to pay before they made a penny of profit.
And is this the fundamental problem with having a left government? Is they're just never going to see the point in that?
Well, I sometimes wonder. I mean, that was why, by the way, as Chancellor, for my entire time as Chancellor, I had a 75% discount on business rates for all retail, hospitality and leisure businesses. So every high street shop, every pub, every restaurant, 75% discount on their business rates. Now, the Labour government's come in and they've taken that away. They've said it's going to go from down to 40% and then down to 0. But what's happening, in my constituency, I've got 3 pubs closing.
Yeah,
it's had a really big impact, those kinds of changes. So look, I want money for great public services like the NHS, the police, schools. That comes from the private sector. It's the private sector, growing businesses, paying taxes, that funds our public services. And you need to have a tax structure that makes it easy for the private sector to grow.
Mm. What do you think is the biggest single threat to the UK right now?
We've got lots of things you could point to. We've been talking about economic growth and tax and, migration and all these things we've touched on. But the biggest of all is that we are losing hope. There is a former First Sea Lord, head of the Royal Navy, called Admiral Sir Jonathan Band. And he had a great saying. He said, hope is the first duty of command. And the people at the top need to give us hope. That doesn't mean that we think Rome was built in a day. It doesn't mean that we're expecting all the problems to be solved by the time we wake up tomorrow morning. But we want to know that there's a plan and that these problems are being tackled and that we can have some confidence that they'll be tackled quickly. And I think what's happened at the moment is that we started to lose hope. And, I look at the world and we have a global struggle now between autocracy and democracy. China and Russia getting very strong. America's very unpredictable with Donald Trump. And we've got this global tussle going on. And I believe in democracy. I like the rule of law. I like the freedoms that we have in this country. And I want my kids to have those freedoms too. But we're not going to persuade the rest of the world that our way is better if we don't believe it ourselves. And I think we've got to find a way of getting back our self-confidence, our mojo and our hope.
And how do we do that?
I think by having a bit of perspective, by recognising that we've got loads of problems, but so have other countries as well. I mean, we're the 6th largest economy in the world. And in 2039, I just did a book called Can We Be Great Again? And in 2039, 15 years from now, the economists are saying we'll still be the 6th largest economy in the world. We'll actually have caught up with Japan and Germany a little bit. So we've got so much going for us in this country. Sure, we've got big problems we need to sort out, but don't give up. There's all to play for.
So, as a test, once every 2 weeks, I do a really positive, happy, glass half full post on LinkedIn and on X, and they get virtually no views. And it makes me wonder, do we just want to be grumpy? We do like to moan, us Brits, let's be honest. It's a cultural thing. But then it makes me wonder, some things a little bit more nefarious, like the algorithms rewarding. I mean, if you go on X, it can be quite toxic there. And it seems like you bash someone and you get loads of views. So how can we be positive when it seems like everything around us is negative?
Well, I think it is true that on social media, really aggressive, angry posts do better.
Well, they have a name for it, rage baiting. It's a strategy.
Yeah. All I say is that, does that make you happy? I mean, when I set up and ran my own business with my best friend, who's still my best friend actually, they were some of the happiest days of my life. I was in control of my diary.
You hadn't got into politics yet.
No, I chose the people around me. I had a great team of wonderful people in our office in Hammersmith. And, it was fantastic. And I think that optimism is a very important part of happiness. So all I would say is that, we can rage all we like, but in the end, you're just making yourself miserable. And also, it's just not based on reality. I mean, we are a great country. And, yes, we've got problems, but we've got a lot going for us.
Yeah, and I think that's important to talk about, because I do acknowledge that, I'm talking more about the problems than the solutions a lot, although I've tried to offer some here. But actually, our law here is pretty good compared to many other countries. Legal system's pretty solid. You own a property in the UK, you own it. There's plenty of countries where if they want it, they'll take it off you.
I'll tell you one, Rob. In the pandemic, vaccines and treatments discovered in the UK saved more lives across the world than those from any other country.
Wow.
We have fantastic universities and research programs, London, Oxford, Cambridge, So I think we're also a pretty good force for good in the world.
I don't want to slide back into negative, but
you're going to.
But you say all this and you get me optimistic again, and I agree, and the sun is shining, and then I just think, but Labour are running the country. Give us some morsel to be positive about Labour.
Well, they haven't done a bad job on the international stage, actually.
What you mean? Keir's been good at pandering to Donald.
Well, you can put it that way, but actually,
that's a strategy, though.
That is important for the UK. We've got the best trade deal with America compared to other countries with our 10% tariff rate. I think all tariffs are bad, by the way, but compared to other countries. So I think that's the least bad bit of what we've seen from Labour, and there have been some successes there. So I would say that's a bit of good news. I would say that Donald Trump is starting to say the right thing about Ukraine, finally. It's taken a while, but we seem to be getting there. And look, I'd say this as well. I'm going to give you my last sort of optimistic comment. We often talk, and I'm sure you've talked with Nigel Farage on your programme about the global migration crisis. Where are all these migrants trying to get into? It's not Russia and it's not China. They're trying to come to Europe and North America. Maybe they understand something about how good our systems are that we've forgotten ourselves.
Or could it be they know that it's pretty easy to gain the welfare?
Well, there's definitely a bit of that. But that's a UK thing. But you look at it more broadly, and they're look at Europe, look at North America. They want to come to the Western liberal democracies.
So what do you think about the state of free speech in the UK? There was this big rally, wasn't there? The Tommy Robinson free speech rally.
I think we've got to be careful. And I think there are some things happening that make me uncomfortable when I look at people, comedians being arrested and people being, getting visits from the police because of their social media posts. And to me, this is an example of where political correctness has gone mad. There's too much wokery, and what we want is the police focusing on real crime. So I don't think it's a crisis. I don't think that we have a massive problem with free speech in the UK compared to lots of countries. But I do think in those particular areas, it's been going in the wrong direction.
Okay, so final two questions. Why did you decide to get into politics? You're an entrepreneur. You know what being an entrepreneur is like. You sold your business. You've won at life, and then you go into politics.
Well, not for the popularity, that's for sure. There is something incredibly rewarding about public service. I'll give you an example. When I was health secretary, I was one of the most unpopular people in the country. The junior doctors were on strike for a year, and I was detested across the NHS. My thing was patient safety, reducing the number of avoidable deaths in the NHS, which I thought there were too many. And by the end of my time, we had 2 fewer baby deaths every day across the NHS. Now, no one knows that.
Now they do.
But I will be proud of that till the day I die. And you don't get a chance to do that in business. So it is a privilege.
And then finally, what was one maybe mistake or regret?
Very good question. Every job I did, I had mistakes and regrets. You're talking to the person who, in front of the whole world's media, called his Chinese wife Japanese. that was like the faux pas to beat all faux pas. So I had plenty of those. But look, I said when I was Chancellor, I wish we'd done more on welfare reform, and I really do think that. When I was Health Secretary, I wish I'd scrapped all the national targets, because the NHS is run like a Stalinist bureaucracy, and it makes it impossible for managers to do their job. But overall, I don't have regrets, actually. I'm really proud to have done what I've done. And, I think Bill Clinton said that, don't ask for praise after you've left these jobs. The privilege is doing the jobs themselves.
Jeremy, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Silver has crashed. It's back to its price in 1974, and I'm going to buy more. And if you'd like to learn how to invest and build multiple streams of recurring income, I recommend you join Money.School. Money.School is my global financial education platform to help as many people on this planet get better financial knowledge. For less than 4 Starbucks coffees a month, there are hundreds of hours of courses, resources, and masterclasses going back a decade to teach how to make, manage, and multiply money and gain financial freedom. So join thousands of other money and freedom seekers on the link Money.School and start today your journey to financial freedom and more money.